YouTube! What is up, everybody? Doomwake here, and welcome to another video on the channel. This one's going to be a little bit different. This one is going to be mostly a discussion video. For people who don't know, spoiler alert, I got one of these! What does this mean? This means that I'm now qualified for the DreamHack Dallas event, and it is because I won an RCQ on Friday night, believe it or not, FNM RCQ, with this lovely masterpiece. This is a deck that we have been working on for a couple of days now. What's really unfortunate about this is we ended up finding it a little bit too late into the season. It's one of those decks that I kind of wish that we had found maybe a month ago, because more people could have played it and iterated on it. And, you know, this version is good, but it's probably not the final version of where it should be. But, yeah, I mean, I played the RCQ yesterday. I guess there is one small change that I made. I ended up cutting this for a Spell Pierce because I could not find a Tainted Indulgence, believe it or not. I ended up going to the store that I went to. They didn't have any Tainted Indulgences in stock, so made that swap. But yeah, the RCQ went phenomenal. Like I said, we did a ton of work on this deck, a few streams prior to the event. And for those of you who may not know some of these cards, because there's maybe some cards you haven't seen before, let's kind of go over the kind of more unique cards and what this deck is doing that other decks aren't. So this deck is built around the card Prof's Eidetic Memory. Let me get the full window up here so you guys can see the actual card, because for some reason Moto does not let me zoom. But here you go. So here is Prof's in all of its glory. So this card is a 2-mana enchantment. It says when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. You have no maximum hand size, which I will say did not come up for me a single time, because a lot of the cards that you have that draw also discard. So you don't end up having more than 7 cards on most of the time. But it says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you've drawn more than 1 card this turn, put X +1/+1 counters on a creature, where X is the number of cards you've drawn this turn, -1. Now, you might say to yourself, why is that powerful? Well, if you combine it with a bunch of cards that happen to have the text, draw a card, and funny enough, Fire Design strikes again, it seems that every single card these days they print also draws a card. So we have Steam Core Scholar. That's kind of the card that you're looking to curve Profs into most of the time. The 2/2 Flying Vigilance. When it ETBs, you draw 2, discard 2, or an instant or a sorcery card, or a creature with flying. So you draw 2, and then you either discard 2 or one of instant sorcery flyer. So the powerful curve: turn 2 Profs, turn 3 Steam Core Scholar, draw 2, discard maybe 1, maybe 2. You go to combat. You put 2 counters on your Steam Core Scholar, you've now made a 4/4 Flying Vigilance. Very good. Also, pretty interesting that there's Vigilance on a blue card. Not exactly sure why that's the case, but here we are. And then other cards that you have that say draw card on them are Ledger Shredder. I'm sure you're probably all familiar with this one by now. Very good because you have a decent number of 1 and 2 mana plays, so you're going to be double spelling very frequently, and a lot of your opponents double spell. If they don't have an answer immediately, things like Boros Convoke and Mono Red, they kind of have to double spell. So you get a lot of triggers off of this. Now keep in mind, this only triggers on your turn, so if they double spell in their pre-combat main phase, you don't get counters on their turn, but it's still fine. And then we also have Consider, just 1 mana cantrip, pretty simple. And then Evangel of Synthesis. This was kind of a more recent finding, and I'm very, very impressed with this card all day. And what's nice about this is it gives you some sort of evasion, right? We talked about Steam Core Scholar being very good because it has flying, but it also has vigilance. So, you know, loading up on a flying vigilance creature allows you to get offensive and also still be able to play defense. Now, Evangel doesn't necessarily play defense as well, because it doesn't have vigilance, but it does give you that sort of evasive 2-drop that you kind of desperately wanted, while also synergizing with Profs, because it says ETB, draw discard, and then as long as you've drawn 2 or more cards this turn, gets +1/+0, and has Menace. So you can imagine, play this on 2, play Profs on 3, draw a card. It's now a 3/3 because of its own ability. Go to combat, counter on this, you now have a 4/4 Menace. That's pretty good. And then the last card that you may Another recent addition, and funny enough, I think I boarded this card out basically every single match, so I don't know if this should be in the deck, but it is very good with profs specifically, and the way that I look at it is, it's, at least to me, it seems like it's a good game one card, but much worse when people board in additional sweepers, because, especially, like, okay, against the aggressive decks, it's a little too slow. And against the control decks, specifically blue-white, it gets swept up by lockdown. So it's like, it is good against them when they have less sweepers, but it's a little bit worse post-board when they have more of them, if that makes sense. But the combo here is you play, so this is, yeah, it's an 0-1 Skulk that ETBs with X counters, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, if it has one or more counters, you can remove a counter. If you do, draw a card. So the curve here is you play this on turn 1, then turn 2, you play your second land and profs. Profs, ETB, draw a card. Combat, you've drawn the extra card off profs because it cantrips on itself. Counter on Prodigy. Pass. Upkeep, trigger Prodigy, remove a counter, draw a card, and then even if you have nothing else in hand, you can keep fueling the Prodigy with the profs, and they kind of bounce off each other very well. And that's assuming you have nothing else. And, you know, obviously if you end up drawing more cards, Prodigy gets more counters, it can get a little bit out of hand that way. But again, that's kind of the one flex spot in the deck that I'm not sure what it should be, but everything else I was very, very impressed with. There is one copy of Gix where normally traditional Dimir decks, you'd probably see a couple more copies of this card, but the thing about Gix is it doesn't work with profs in the sense of this only triggers on beginning of combat, and Gix triggers after your creatures have dealt damage. So, yes, Gix is a powerful card, but it is less good with profs, and the way that I wanted to kind of structure this deck and craft it is I wanted to make it as all in on profs as I possibly could. So that was the concept, and that's why we're only playing one Gix. As far as everything else in the main deck is concerned, I mean, it's normal cards. Spyglass Siren, Cut Down, Go for the Throat, Shieldred. Don't need to explain those cards. Mana base, pretty straightforward. Sideboard, also fairly straightforward. Cryptic Coat is just a good grindy card. Negate Disdainful Stroke. Excuse me. Negate Disdainful Stroke, good against the control decks and Domain. Third copy of Shieldred's pretty important, specifically against Domain, because post-board they're going to have lockdowns, and as you can probably imagine, lockdown's really good against this deck. So, Steamcore Scholar, or excuse me, Shieldred helps a little bit with that in the post-board games. Deluge for Toxic, Convoke, well, Convoke and Toxic. Extract, good at... What I like about Extract over the third copy of Duress is it's less timing restrictive, where Extract can still take their Atraxa, which I guess Duress can as well, but what's nice is you can make them sacrifice a Binding, right? Because normally discard spells, if you top deck them later on in the game, they're dead, but if they only have one Binding and you top deck Extract, still not that bad, right? Duress, pretty straightforward. Kaido, pretty straightforward. Grindy matchups. And then Hearse was mainly only here for Temur lands, which, funny enough, I did play in the RCQ. And, yeah, it's kind of weird because you're giving up, quote-unquote, 3 sideboard spots just for a single matchup, but I do think it is kind of worth it in the long run. So that is the main deck. Now, as far as the matchups are concerned, it was a small RCQ. It was, like I said, it was an RCQ on a Friday night, believe it or not, and it started at 6:30 p.m. I ended up getting there just about 10 minutes before the event started, wrote my deck list out just in time. And it was 5 rounds. It was 19 people, I think. 19 people, 5 rounds, cut the top 8. And here are my matchups. So round 1 was against a cookies deck. It was actually Bant Cookies. Now, for those of you who may watch, fellow content creator Ash Lizzle, she has played a lot of her Simic Cookies deck. And this was a Bant version that featured white for things like Warden of the Inner Sky, Dusk Rose Reliquary, things like that. I ended up losing game 1. Won the 2 Pours board games. We actually, funny enough, we went to time. My opponent was maybe playing a little bit too slow, and honestly, that's on me. I probably should have said something to, kind of have them speed up a little bit, or just like bring up the fact that we only had a couple of minutes left on the clock. But I ended up winning on turn 5 of turns because I drew my 1 Otawara, which was the only out I had to bounce a glyphed up creature, because the Zoetic Glyph gets around both Go for the Throat and Cut Down. So I peeled my 1 outer Otawara on the very last turn of turns to have lethal that turn. So that was pretty fun. That was round one against the Cookies deck. Against Blue Eye Control in round two, games were mostly uneventful. Well, actually, funny enough, I mean, game one, I had a pretty good curve where I went Spyglass into Profs into another 2-drop. They had the lockdown on 3, and they had the answer for my Shieldred, but the rest of my hand was just too good. Was not enough for them, was too much for them to overcome, and then ended up drawing a bunch of counter spells in game 2. Pretty easy, just, 2 of them very easy. Teamer lands, this is the kind of Aftermath Analyst, World Souls Rage, things like that. That was the matchup for round 3. Game 1, they got a bunch of mana in play, but I was luckily able to draw my 1 of Spell Pierce in game 1. They tapped out for Virtue, I Spell Pierced it, untapped, killed them. And then game 2, I think the matchup is insanely favorable post-board, because if you look at the sideboard, we have 3 counter spells, 3 discard spells, and 3 hearses. So I kind of was able to clean up pretty easily in game number 2. Now that I'm 3-0 in the event, there's only a 5-round tournament. We can just draw the last 2 rounds. Easy clap, chop, chop into top 8. Top 8. This is where I got, well, my opponent got their rematch, the Cookies rematch. Yeah, everybody's asking what WTF is Cookies. It's a Tough Cookie Zoetic. It's an artifact aggro deck, so it has Tough Cookie, Zoetic Glyph, Teething Wormlet, Warden of the Inner Sky, Dusk Rose Reliquary, Sentinel of the Nameless City, and it's trying to utilize like artifact synergies with Tough Cookie. I don't remember a ton about the games. I'm trying to think. As far as the top 8 match is concerned versus Cookies, I kind of think that they just got run over in both games. Like, both of my draws were insane. I can't remember a ton about those games. Playing Magic at 1 in the morning, things kind of get blurred a little bit, so apologies for that. The Domain matchup I do remember quite well. So game 1 was, I thought I was crushing. I thought I was just absolutely dominating. There was like, opponent was missing their 6th land drop. They were stuck on 5 for a while. And they ended up getting to a point where they like played an Archangel. They were getting attacked by a Restless Reef, so they had to play an Archangel just to go to 6 to not die to the Restless Reef. Then they ended up having the chump with an Archangel, and so on and so forth. What ended up happening game 1 is they played a Beanstalk, and they were at, I think, 5 life. And I ended up going, I had a Shredder in play. I triggered Shredder, drew Shieldred, played it. They just played their 7th land tapped for Atraxa. So I knew that like 100% they were going to cast Atraxa next turn. So I ripped the Shieldred off the Shredder, played it, passed. They didn't have Binding on their upkeep. Well, also they had a Beanstalk in play too, so remember that. Draw for turn, go to 3. They had to cast Atraxa because they didn't have the Binding in hand. Trigger Beanstalk, go to 1. They found the Binding, but they're at 1, and if they cast the Binding, they're dead to the Beanstalk because they draw a card off the Shieldred. So was able to win game number 1, and then game 2. Game 2 honestly was kind of a runaway. I just had 1-drop, 2-drop. I drew the 1 Gix on turn 3. Of course, a common theme in this RCQ, you'll notice that I drew my 1-ofs a lot, and they were good when I drew them. And honestly, that's kind of what you have to do to win a Magic tournament. So, 1-drop, 2-drop Gix, had a bunch of counter spells, was not a very eventful game. And then in the finals, Dimir Midrange. This was kind of your more traditional Dimir deck. More Gixes, Preachers, Spyglass Sirens, make disappears, that kind of stuff. We had some very, very close games. In the first game, I'm trying to remember exactly what happened. There was a situation where I think we were like attacking each other back and forth with Gixes, and it got to a spot where I'm trying to remember exactly what happened. They like cryptic coded. Oh no, that was game 2. It was game 1. I don't remember. It was really back and forth. I think I ended up like top decking a Go for the Throat for a Shieldred. Had my Shieldred, they couldn't kill it. Things like that. And then game 2 was unbelievable. So there was a situation where they had a cryptic code, and they had I had just played a Shieldred. So I played a Shieldred, passed. they went to their turn. They tanked on their upkeep when they had 2 cards in hand, I think. Tanked on their upkeep, drew for turn. I had Shieldred. They triggered it. They lost 2 life, and they ended up, because they had a Cryptic Coat with a creature face down on it. They ended up attacking with Cryptic Coat and I think a Flyer, and I didn't have a flying blocker. They flipped up Shieldred, and I was like, oh, this is bad. And because even though we both have Shieldred, so like our Shieldreds kind of cancel each other out, their attack was putting me to 5. And because they had Shieldred with a Cryptic Code on it, if I didn't find an answer, I was just going to be dead, because our Shieldreds are canceling each other out. Like, right? We're not losing life, we're not gaining life. They're canceling each other out. And I was like, looking at my hand with 2 considers, I was like, all right, well, I have to find a Go for the Throat. And I said that too. I said to my opponent, I really need to find Go for the Throat this turn. Draw for turn, not a Go for the Throat. Trigger Shieldreds, we both, bounce off. I cast the Consider, take a look at my top card, put it back on top. Draw, tap 2 mana, cast Go for the Throat, kill their Shieldred, cast the other Consider, gain 2 life, go up to 5, and then get out of range of the Flyer. And that was like the turning point, right? Now, there was still a point where, and I think my opponent might have missed this, but there was a point where I had to get a little aggressive to not die to like them just picking up Coat over and over again and having an endless stream of blockers with Coat. So there was a situation where I left myself, I was at 5 life, and I had attacked with my Shieldred. Or this might have been after they killed the Shieldred. I think I attacked with my Restless Reef. Yeah, this is when I attacked with my Restless Reef. They're at 4. They had the chump block with their Spyglass Siren, and I only had 1 mana untapped. Right now, I only had 1 mana untapped. So they have 4 lands, a Restless Reef. They had an extra land, so they had 6 mana total. Right, 4 to activate the Reef with 1 untapped, and a map token. Now, here's the situation. They have Restless Reef map token, right? They're at 4. I have Restless Reef, no map token. I'm at 5. You see where I'm going with this. They have, and I only have 1 mana up, so they know that I can't have anything. They have the opportunity to gamble, because they had no cards in hand. They can gamble, animate the Reef, crack the map. If they hit the 50-50, well, maybe it's higher than 50-50. If they hit a spell, they have, put a counter on Reef, that's lethal. But if they hit a land, they're dead, because they can't animate their Reef to block my Reef. So they tanked for a little bit. They think, what happened? I think they passed, right? Yeah, they passed. I ended up drawing an Otawara, but I didn't have enough mana to animate the Restless Reef, attack, and Otawara their Reef after attackers. So I just decided to not attack and pass, because I figured that if they animated the Reef, I could then just Otawara it, untap it, attack them, right? And I had a Spell Pierce in hand, which wasn't doing that much. So then I passed, they untapped, drew, or they bounced the Coat end of turn. So they went untap, cast the Coat with 3 mana untapped. I cast the Spell Pierce to make them tap the 2, and then they ended up using the map on the token. I Otawara the token, they were tapped out, I had the Reef, and that's it. That's all she wrote. So, they could have gone for lethal that turn, but it was a gamble, because if they hit a land, they're just dead. Otherwise, they can at least leave the Reef back to block. Now, I don't know, maybe there's a chance that they're supposed to go for that, but, sometimes you just gotta gamble. But yeah, that was the RCQ. Like I said, I kind of wish that we had found this deck a little bit earlier, because I fully believe this deck is completely insane. And if you are watching this and you have RCQs this weekend, you should probably be playing this deck, because I think it's incredible, and I'm going to be spending a lot more time on it for the upcoming, now that I'm qualified for Dallas, we got to spend some more time on it to at least test for Dallas. So, but yeah, that was kind of an RCQ breakdown. Moving forward, I did cut Ingenious Prodigy in basically every matchup, but I don't know exactly what I would want to play over it. So I'd have to find, I'm going to try some different things and see if I can find something better than Prodigy. Those could maybe be Deep Cavern Bats, not entirely sure. But everything other than that, the deck was basically perfect. So if you are watching this on YouTube, thank you so much for tuning in. Let me know in the comment section down below what you thought of this type of discussion video. What was your favorite moment about the RCQ run? I know I didn't get into too much detail, but and with all that, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye, YouTube!